Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Are we live? How about that? Okay, well, let's see if everything is going well. So far, so good. Thumbs up. All the correct computer things appear to be happening. That's a good thing. So, good morning. It is Wednesday, June 29th, 2022. Time for yesterday's show, really, because it's 24 hours overdue. But you already got that via podcast. We did go on to many of you downloaded and listened to the awkwardly timed show. I know all the breaks were out of place because the first 10 minutes of the show were missing. But thanks to Joan McCarter for soldiering on as though we were live. You know, it's a fairly easy thing to do after you get started to pretend. And usually we can't, we can't see you, we can't hear you. So I guess it shouldn't be that different. But somehow psychologically, just knowing that you're not there makes us as sads, I guess. All right, thumbs up from Justice. The team at Netroots Radio working hard overnight to make sure that things were ready, and there was some weird terminology involved somewhere along the line. What was it that you said to me yesterday, Justice, about that somebody said something about droplets? All I remember was that there were droplets. And isn't that how we thought COVID started, but then it turned out to be aerosolized, and that's why it didn't work, right? Something like that. Well, at any rate, I didn't understand any of that, and maybe he didn't either, but the important thing is we're back on the air, and it's working, and those of you who love to have the show live on the stream, you have your wish. And we had those super secret surprise hearings yesterday. I don't know if I have seen anything, maybe Greg has, and he can update us on this, about exactly why it was that they felt that they needed to have that testimony taken yesterday. There was speculation that Cassidy Hutchinson was, I don't know if there was, before she spoke, there was speculation, well, maybe she'll change her mind and not give that testimony, but it seems pretty clear that she had made up her mind to give that testimony, although who knows what people's mental state is. I know that she's had to have additional security measures taken. I'm sure there are hardcore Trump loyalists who want to threaten her with harm for having told the stories that she told. There's less violent, the reaction that several Trump loyalists are insistent that her story was false or is full of holes. There's, for some reason, I don't know exactly why. I mean, I guess you start with the basic, pursuit of the true story idea. But it gets a little weird and obsessive. A couple of reporters pretty sure that they can dig out sources who will say that no, all the stories that Hutchinson told about, for instance, Trump, maybe the most bizarre part of it, basically physically fighting with his Secret Service detail to drive him to the Capitol, which is an interesting thing all by itself because everybody else walked to the Capitol. But of course, Donald Trump, he can't just walk to the Capitol, not because he's the president of the United States and he needs to be protected, et cetera, et cetera. Remember, that wasn't a fear for him. He said, they're not here to hurt me. That's a whole separate story. But you'll recall, there was like a G7 summit at some point, maybe a G20 summit. One of the G summits, essentially, the G series of summits, at which all the leaders took, what was it, like a 700-yard stroll down the street? And then he couldn't do it. He needed to wait for a golf cart to pull him down the street, right? There was no way he was walking to the Capitol. But anyway, that's one of the more bizarre stories. Greg says he's got the whole thing covered in terms of telling that story. But getting into the car and the beast, as they call it, or they've recently begun calling it, the armored car. And then he is fighting with the Secret Service, literally, because they told him, well, we can't protect you down there, so we're not going to the Capitol. He wanted to go, and apparently the story develops now that he was interested possibly in giving another speech at the Capitol in some way. But at any rate, he wanted to get himself down there, and like a responsible adult human being, couldn't get himself about a mile down the road without being carted there in a specially designed motor vehicle. And when they told him that he wasn't going to go, he actually, according to the story, reaches forward and tries to grab the steering wheel. Now, of course, it's the gas pedal that you really need to be in control of, but the steering wheel helps, gives you some general idea which direction you're going to go in. I don't know if he knows the way to the Capitol, by the way. I don't know if he could have driven himself. That's another interesting question. But apparently grabbed for the steering wheel, and according to the story told yesterday, the Secret Service agents grab his wrist. They were probably going for his hands, but it was too small, and they missed, and they got his wrist. And then Trump's other free hand, he takes a swing at or lunges for the neck of this Secret Service driver, which, they're not going to be able to drive if you're strangling them. I don't know. It seems a little bit, I will say that there should be some room for skepticism in all of this, because I can't imagine Donald Trump, as deluded as he is, I still can't imagine him saying, yeah, everybody just hold your horses a second. I'm going to kick this, Secret Service guy's ass. Like, you're not really in shape for that. And to say I'm gonna take out my own Secret Service detail, punch him out, and slap him silly and make him do whatever. So it does seem a little bit ridiculous, but then again, the story that President Trump was at that point mentally unfit for just about anything, and certainly the United States presidency. That I have no difficulty believing either. Anyway, so they'll be trying to poke her story full of holes for the next couple of days. We'll see how it goes, but if it keeps the story in the headlines, it's not such a bad thing, really. And anyway, by most accounts, the testimony yesterday was damaging enough that if they really wanted to spend the next couple of days nipping around the heels of it, that wouldn't be such an awful thing PR-wise. But, very weird. Still no explanation, but Greg, maybe you have got one for why yesterday. And my guess is, I wonder whether the answer comes later this week when somebody publishes some blockbuster version of this story that they were going to break, but I still think that's a strong possibility that the committee wanted to have the basics of the story entered into the public record at the hearings as opposed to published in the New York Times. But they probably also asked them, don't publish it the day after. Wait 2 days so that there's a decent interval so that nobody figures out our brilliant plan here. I don't know. Good morning, Greg. How are you today?
I'm fine. So
Well
my
done.
working theory
Yes.
is that the major reason why they had to do this now, besides the drama, which was great, is
We love
they
the
really
drama.
want to put maximum pressure on Pat Cipollone and maybe a couple other people to actually
yes,
come out
that's
and
a good
testify.
thought.
And this is the second time in second consecutive hearing, if I'm not mistaken, that Liz Cheney specifically called out Cipollone by name and said, you know all this stuff, you have to testify. And now we're actually going to give other people who were there who told us what you said, and you know about all of this, and you have to testify. And I think they're putting a lot of pressure on people who already know. And a lot of things have been said about yesterday, all of them true, just like with the perfect call from Trump to Zelensky. Roger Zelensky, my favorite science fiction author,
Rusty
to
Stahl.
Vladimir Zelensky.
Yeah.
It takes a woman with courage to come up there to the Hill and tell the truth when all the men are sort of hiding behind, privilege and I can't talk about it and all this other garbage. And that's what happened yesterday, and it was great. And it was quite dramatic, and we'll go over that. But the specific thing about the Beast story,
Yes.
and I guess like Air Force One, there's different beasts depending upon, which one he's in. There's the limo,
Yeah.
the major beast. He was in the SUV for this incident, which is also referred to as the Beast by some of the reporters. And then there's his armored golf cart, which is nicknamed the Leviathan. And that's what he does when he doesn't want to walk 60 feet. But he wasn't in that one.
Okay.
And the major parts of the story, I think, are getting a little bit lost. And to put this in context, one of the political cartoons, which I just sent you, has a picture of Trump diving for the steering wheel.
Ah, yes. Okay.
but off to the side that you could see through the front window is gas price $2.75, and you have an elephant representing the GOP pointing the picture and say, "See, look at the gas prices." The whole point is to try to get a distraction about what was going on, and that's why there's this many controversy over exactly what happened in the Beast. So to put it in context, I want to give you a little Carl Bernstein. You remember Carl Bernstein?
Okay.
He was the other guy with Woodward who did a little thing called Watergate. So Carl Bernstein asked a simple but brilliant question. Why was Donald Trump so intent on getting to the Capitol? Why did he want to be there with all those armed people?
But not intent enough to walk. But yeah.
Well, Trump knew Pence wasn't going to interfere with the formal vote counting, so Bernstein says, well, Trump was going to go do it himself.
He may have.
Today's granular real-life account plus puts the second impeachment in a different light because Trump's own cabinet considered an emergency effort to invoke 25th Amendment, and I think that's part of the reason why.
Yes.
Those voting with Trump knew what he had done. The public surprised by today's testimony, but a lot of Republican officials knew all of this. This is from Charles Fishman, who's reporting that. Trump was so desperate to join the rioters, to lead the rioters, that he bullied his own Secret Service detail. And why was he so determined to get to the Capitol that day? That's a brilliant investigative reporter's simple, revealing question, not for nothing. The president's chief of staff is often considered the second most powerful person in the world, and Hutchinson urged Mark Meadows to get Trump to act, and Trump said no, and Meadows said no, Trump wants to be alone. So the whole point there is that Trump was totally central to the coup and being aided and abetted by Mark Meadows, who was not a bystander and who didn't drop the ball. He was assisting Trump by shielding him.
Yeah.
So that's part of the background there. And so what happens is that he gets into this vehicle and he wants to go, and Secret Service says, no,
vroom, vroom.
Really can't because it's not safe and we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so he doesn't get to go, and he's mad about it. Now, whether he tried to strangle a guy who's in 20 times better shape than he with his tiny little hands, or whether he grabbed the wheel, or whether he lunged, or whether he didn't lunge, and people are arguing about what's the meaning of lunge, none of that's important. The important thing is he wanted to go to the White House, and we know that that's a fact. And the way that we know it's a fact is something that people have otherwise overlooked. And that is that Engel, who is the Secret Service agent in question, who was in the car, has already testified to the committee.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
And it corroborates, basically. And in fact, this whole thing was reported
in the car,
back at the beginning of the month by Betsy Woodruff, who has a quote. Basically, Engel says that Trump wanted to go to the White House, and basically they said you can't.
To the Capitol. Yeah.
And to the Capitol, and you can't. And that's the important part here. Not whether or not he lunged, and not whether and how aggressive he was. But that's all stupid stuff. It doesn't matter. That's the hearsay part that people talk about. Well, the whole thing was hearsay. No, that 2 seconds of it was hearsay. But the important nub of it is that Trump wanted to go to the White House, and that's important corroborating detail to what Secret Service has already testified to the committee, and the committee already knows that. So they didn't put that out there because they were sloppy and now everybody's going to yell at them because they're doing hearsay. They knew what they were doing. They put the facts out there first, as David Folkenflik from NPR summarizes.
Yes.
The White House knew about the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys.
Right. We knew them.
Rudy and Mark Meadows wanted pardons for what they did.
Yes, that was news too. I don't know if I had heard Rudy's name at that point, but anyway, we got it now. And yes, right.
Right, and at the speech, Trump wanted armed protesters waved in. I mean, that's what happened yesterday. And the fact that whether or not he physically assaulted a Secret Service agent trying to take him back to the White House in the Beast, the point is he wanted to go to the Capitol. And so, in context with Carl Bernstein's, why did he want to be there? That's what's important.
Well, yeah, it is an interesting angle. I mean, First, I don't think that it's actually hearsay.
Well, that's the other thing.
But that's the charge, yeah. But
and
okay.
I had a little piece about
That's
that.
another
It isn't hearsay when you're talking about the person who the federal government is aiming at, the other party, the interested party, and that's Trump. It isn't hearsay when, and I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on the internet, but this has been made pretty clear to me. It isn't hearsay when you have somebody who is a prodigious note taker, who's in the habit of taking notes every single day, and who takes notes. That's
right.
one of the many, like
Sort
20
of.
exceptions to the hearsay rule.
Right, that's it.
You're a note taker.
Exception to the hearsay rule, well recognized, and so it's hearsay, but it's admissible hearsay. But but the description of the physical altercation that somebody now, I guess if she didn't,
but it's hearsay because she heard him say it.
Yes, well, that's true, but then it's a question of whether
then
she
that's
was
first person.
testifying to.
It's not the hearsay rule. So that's all a distraction and nonsense as well. The major things that happened is that Cassie Hutchinson was able to document and tell the committee under oath.
Here she's calling again. This is really. We should just let her testify a second time. I'm sure she's willing to talk again. We'll wait. That's okay. And maybe you should take this call, Greg.
I am not taking this call. Yeah.
Okay.
So
the
thing is that she clearly established that his state of mind was basically nuts, and that's why she told the red rum ketchup story.
Oh, yeah, I didn't catch the ketchup story. All I know is people were talking all of a sudden about ketchup on the wall or something, and I didn't know what was going on.
So she told the story about how she happened to be in the area, and Bill Barr, who was the Attorney General at the time, had given an interview saying that he really didn't find any evidence of voter fraud.
Yes, right.
And so, Trump really lost. And so Trump got really angry. And he threw his lunch in the White House Oval Office dining room, which is a tiny room off of the Oval Office, onto the wall. And since he likes ketchup on everything, ketchup got all over the wall. And Cassie Hutchinson came in, I guess, right after the fact and helped the valet clean up.
I see.
Now, technically, I suppose that's, destroying government property, and I suppose that's a problem. Right. It's one of the many things that Trump did, probably the least of it. But the point is to sort of illustrate the state of mind of somebody who loses his temper really easily, and so in context, getting so angry at the Secret Service that he lunged at him is not, out of the question. Is that important for a court of law? No, this wasn't a court of law yesterday. These are the committee members presenting a witness to talk to the public and, of course, other reporters. And it's a very dramatic telling, both the ketchup story and the Beast story. And whereas only the part about the Beast being relevant because Trump wants to go to the Capitol for some reason is part of what the Department of Justice might be interested in. If you're trying to dramatically tell the whole picture of what was going on, it's perfect. And it doesn't have to be admissible in court. It's not important for that.
That's true. It's not in court. It doesn't make much of a difference. I mean, the rules in court would control, but that's what they're doing here. Something totally different. And saying that it's hearsay and not admissible in court is it's just an opposite. It's okay. It's not admissible at opening day for the Major League Baseball either, but.
Right. And so while this is happening, you have the elephant pointing at the gas prices.
Oh, yes, right.
Jeremy Neuberger points out that he was watching Fox News, and Fox News did cover these hearings, and they were stunned by it, of course, during the day. But as the course of the day goes on, things change, and Neuberger writes, Cassidy Hutchinson's level got lower and lower with each Fox interview last night. She started out as Trump's chief of staff's principal aide, and by the time Laura Ingraham came on, she was the mailroom janitor with zero clearance who worked in a satellite office in Paramus, New Jersey.
Right.
Which is about how they go, well, what does she know? She didn't really know.
She's the coffee
girl
girl for the coffee
most
boy.
Important person to the second most important person in the country.
Yeah. And for a long time, apparently.
And what she also did.
And she's young.
Is she's 25. But what she also did is she clearly and articulately pointed out that Mark Meadows was in the middle of all of this and completely indifferent to the fact that people were going to die until the aforementioned Pat Cipollone ran in the office and said, you have to do something or blood is going to be on your effing hands. And only then did he say, okay, well, let's go talk to Trump and see what he wants to do. But he doesn't want to do anything about it. Well, why doesn't he want to do anything about it? Because he wanted this to happen.
Yeah. And he's also, even if he didn't, he's a lazy lump.
Well, but, he's involved here.
But
he's
actually
who was
guilty.
Meadows on the phone with every time the witness Cassidy Hutchinson tried to interrupt him to talk about the violence? Who was he on the phone with? Was it the Willard group, the insurrectionists? Who was he on the phone with?
We don't know that.
We don't know. And so that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on Meadows as well. So Pat Cipollone, who still comes across as, quote, one of the good guys, end quote, which is to say a Trumper who was willing to work with the evil, but on the last day, like Mike Pence, did something that was useful, was under tremendous pressure to testify publicly about what he knows. Mark Meadow, who is, and I'm going to be very loose with these terms. I get to do it because I'm not a lawyer and this isn't a courtroom.
Okay.
But the indicted co-conspirator Mark Meadows is pretty clearly painted as being part and parcel of everything that happened. He didn't just drop the ball. He was actively trying to assist Trump in making this happen. Yeah. And that's the picture that was painted. And the unindicted co-conspirator from yesterday is Kevin McCarthy, who knew all of this at least the day after, and then a week after went and kissed Trump's ass.
Yeah. Right. And, of course, on the day of, calling him fearing for his life, please help.
Well, a lot of things happen in the fog of war, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But there's no question that McCarthy knew all of this, had a chance to talk to everybody from Meadows to whoever he wanted to talk to find out what actually happened. He saw at his end what happened, and obviously was shaken by it, and blew all of that off and still went back to Trump. Mm-hmm. There is absolutely no excusing that, and it's crystal clear that that's what happened.
Yep, pretty much. Okay, what do we do?
So, what happens later? I mean, who is the audience for this? Again, Department of Justice has plenty of material. The reporters reporting on this every day were part of the audience. The public was part of the audience, and the drama and the way that it was presented worked really well. So whatever the reasons were for having the emergency hearing, they pulled it off.
Yes, although I'd still like to have that answer as to what it was. Why yesterday? But it will reveal itself in time, and it's not particularly important. Of course, the story itself was what was important.
Well, you give the reporters something to go on, and that,
Yeah, maybe
that makes the editor say, well, this is still an open question. We have to get on this and maybe publish more stories about this during the break that they're not speaking.
It could be as simple as that, and it would be great strategy if it was. So, why yesterday? Oh, nothing about yesterday or the timing. We just wanted to throw everybody a curveball and keep them interested. Huh, okay. That's fine. That's allowed. That would make the Republicans furious, but terrific. What could be better?
Right.
Make them furious about something about which they have no right to be angry, and have them spin themselves up into a frenzy over it, and I don't know, and then talk about gas prices somehow.
Right. And of course, the fact that Rudy Giuliani was said to have asked for a pardon, and that Mark Meadows was said to have asked for a pardon, only corroborates the fact that these guys are in big trouble legally.
Well, good. And all right, well, we'll wait and see how this all shakes out and what sort of attacks they attempt to launch against Hutchinson today. See whether any of them stick.
Sarah Longwell. Well, again, the warning about going after witnesses was also part and parcel of the last part here. Here's the witness statement, and that Liz Cheney presented at the very end of the hearing. What they said to me is, as long as I continue to be a team player, they know I'm on the team. I'm doing the right thing. I'm protecting who I need to protect. I'll continue to stay in good graces in Trump world. And they've reminded me a couple of times that Trump does read transcripts. I don't think he reads, but that doesn't matter. And just to keep that in mind as I proceeded through my depositions and interviews with the committee. So apparently this is taken from The Godfather in that scene right before the Mook is supposed to testify at a Senate hearing and suddenly clams up and has nothing to say.
Yeah. So that illustrated things pretty clearly. She was and outlines a whole different line of charges that can be brought just for witness tampering alone.
Right. Now, the actual line, and again, there's so many different things that happen in the hearing, but we don't want to miss this part. At the very beginning, the centering of Trump for the insurrection goes like this. He's unhappy about his rally size at the ellipse, totally
right.
believable because, he's fixated on rally sizes. And he's mad because it's not full, and he starts talking with his people. Why aren't there more people there? Well, there's some outside, but they can't come in because the magnetometers, won't let them in because they're armed.
All right.
And Trump says, and this is the quote, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
Right.
Okay. So in other words, I don't care if they're armed. I know they're not here to hurt me.
Yes. We've guessed as
Well,
much.
who are they there to hurt? And if he knows that, why is he allowing it to happen? I mean, not to spell out the basics here, but for some reason, a lot of the reporters who heard that were, quote, shocked, end quote, because they still haven't internalized the fact that Trump isn't a normal person.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about other people. He doesn't care if other people are hurt.
Yeah, there was still a lot of normalizing going on. Very odd. Of course, I suppose they could be there not to hurt anybody, but to protect everyone under the Second Amendment, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's still have to get past that. But, yeah, interesting the way he directed all of those people to be let in. I'm still also surprised that none of this came to the attention of the White House pool reporters at any point. That seems bizarre to me. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and we are back on Netroots Radio today. Everything working live, no complaints so far. Whole show's been hearsay, but other than that, it seems to be working technically, so that's good news.
Well, the show is they say, actually.
Right.
But Renato Mariotti, who's a former federal prosecutor and now a legal analyst for various networks, says the First Amendment bar to a prosecution of an elected official for inciting violence when giving a political speech is usually pretty high. Okay. But the quote about I don't care about the weapons, that's awfully damning and gets DOJ in the ballpark. So I think a lot of people have written a lot of things about the fact that, what they heard yesterday is plenty to establish mens rea.
Oh, yes.
And plenty to establish the fact that a lot of people knew beforehand that violence was likely and they didn't care.
Yeah. They enjoyed it.
They
were
wanted
aiming
it.
for it.
The prosecutor might try to make a case to the jury. They wanted this to happen. Why did Trump want to go to the Capitol? Because he wanted to make a speech there on the grounds of everything else.
All right. Well, it's a busy day in your place. All right. Well, many things shaking out of yesterday's testimony still. Including, by the way, I see Armando spending his time online teaching people about the hearsay rule and what is and isn't hearsay. And if you really wanted to parse this thing carefully or pretend that you were a lawyer, even if you weren't one. It would go something like this. But Armando pointing out the hearsay rule is, and I don't think we ever stated the hearsay rule here on the air. Hearsay is, what do they call it? I'm trying to remember from law school days. An out-of-court statement offered in evidence, or you attempt to offer it in evidence for the truth of the matter asserted. That is something I heard said outside of court that I want to tell you so that it can prove what the person said was true. And that poses a problem. But as Armando puts it, the hearsay rule is about whether statements are offered for the truth of the substance. For example, and here's a nice example because this is one we're thinking of, Hutchinson testifies that Ornato told this story about what happened in the Beast, in the Suburban.
Right.
Now, the fact...
Ornato can always come in and corroborate it.
Yes, that's exactly it. The fact that...
Yeah, I'm not even a lawyer.
Ornato said a thing. What did Ornato talk about, Ms. Hutchinson? Well, he told a story about what happened in the car. But the story that he told would be hearsay, so you can't talk about that. No, but I can tell you that he told a story. I can tell you even what the story was about. Now, if you want to have direct evidence of what happened in the car, you'll have to talk to Ornato for that. I can't testify to what happened.
Who was in the car, who, by the way, has already testified to the committee about exactly that.
A second person, certainly, that would be helpful. But what Hutchinson can't tell you is, for the matter of, the jury in a courtroom wouldn't be permitted to take as fact Ornato's story about what happens if all they hear is Hutchinson saying, I heard Ornato tell the story. But she is allowed to say, I heard him tell the story. She was the direct eyewitness to that story being told. And you can even talk about what the story was about. Should you believe it? For that, you have to wait for Ornato to testify.
And
should you believe that it happened, that he told the story? Yes, direct evidence being offered by Hutchinson. I heard the story be told.
Right. And, she's the third in line. The second in line is Ornato, who actually told the story and can testify to the fact that he told the story, whether it's true or not. That's a different matter.
Right.
And Engel, who was in the car, testifies to the committee that Trump wanted to go to the Capitol, which is the important part of the whole thing. Yeah. So you guys figure it out. But the audience, who aren't lawyers and this isn't court, puts the whole thing together and say, I know enough.
Right.
I've seen enough, as David Wasserman might say.
Right. He probably did. I'm sure he said it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, at any rate, I don't know what that really would say. I don't know if it's fair to say we straightened that out. But we did, but you listened.
What's going on here is that, you're making a good case, and of course Armando's right, but you're all making a good case as to why the elephant is pointing at the gas prices, which still has nothing to do with the substance of what's going on here.
All day long.
Trump wanted to go to the Capitol.
Right. And but the Republicans, in particular, the House Judiciary Republicans Twitter account, anyway, spent all day.
Yeah, it's all hearsay.
The people want, not only that, but the people don't care. They care. Where's my hearing on $5 gas? Well,
right, exactly. So that was just such a wonderful cartoon because I think it really gets to the heart of what's going on here.
A great double message in that one. Okay, well that is good news.
Yeah, what's also good news is I threw my phone out the window, so hopefully we won't get interrupted. But we'll see.
It's a busy day, and you should schedule these things for Tuesdays and Fridays from now on.
So speaking of a busy day,
yes,
the other thing that happened yesterday, which of course is going to take a back seat to this, is that there were a bunch of primaries.
Yes, and from the back seat you can strangle the driver, so it's no small thing.
And my favorite primary was the one in Colorado, where Tina Peters, you may remember Tina Peters, election denier,
invoked her yesterday.
Who I think she got fired for trying to steal machines or something,
like
or tampering with
sentenced
machines.
Her to something.
Yeah, anyway, she was running, and she was running against a former Jefferson County clerk, Pam Anderson. Pam Anderson was leading the race with 45 to Peters 26.
Close
Mike O'Donnell, a third guy, was getting 29%. About 12 hours ago when this happens, So the AP calls the Secretary of State GOP primary for Pam Anderson.
Okay.
And Tina Peters says, no, the numbers are flipped. The results are fraudulent. It's not over.
Of course.
And so the election denier won't concede her own loss, as Taniel points out.
Yeah.
And I just think that is just, chef's kiss.
That's a good one. I think the Daily Beast's headline was being circulated on Twitter this morning. Indicted election denier Tina Peters loses her own election and denies she lost.
Well, pretty much,
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
So, there were a bunch of primaries that happened yesterday in Colorado. Heidi Ganahl's going to be the person who takes on Jared Polis, the Democrat. In Illinois, the nutcase Darren Bailey is going to be running against Pritzker. Pritzker put a lot of money in to try to get Bailey elected because he figured he'd be easier to beat, which, by the way, as a general strategy is terrible.
Yeah.
And the Democrats did a lot of that this time. And, don't try to hope for Donald Trump or Doug Mastriano, because what if they win?
Yes. Honestly, enough with this already.
Kathy Hochul is going to be the Democratic person in New York, and Lee Zeldin,
governor person,
who is a Trump clone, and acolyte. But the person who lost to Lee Zeldin was Andrew Giuliani. So the Giulianis had a pretty bad day yesterday overall, I would have to say.
I forgot that he was, trying to do that. That was pretty silly of him to waste his time with it. But all right, the outcome as expected. No, thank you. We don't want any Giulianis, much less the little dumb ones.
Right. So Antonio Delgado will be the lieutenant governor to Hochul, which is what's going on. And in other races, I think those are really the important ones, at least the ones that were important to me, and therefore the ones I looked up and actually remember. But for the most part, people like Lauren Boebert won hers, which is not surprising. And a lot of the district attorneys at district attorney level, the tough on crime people didn't do that well, and the progressive reformers did actually okay.
Okay.
So that happened in places like Utah.
Really?
All right. Let's see. Where else? Local offices. Cook County Sheriff, Cook County Board, 8th District. In an upstate New York area, the Democrats took control of a local government for the first time in 30 years. And so, the whole thing about Democrats falling apart and going to left and this and that and everything else, you didn't see that yesterday in the primaries. That's basically the message there.
Okay, good. That's nice. Good news.
Right. The other good news is that there have been a number of, maybe three.
Three is also a number. Yes.
Three's a number of polling in the wake of Dobbs. The Marist poll had the Democrats going from D+5 to D+7. Morning Consult went from a tie to D+3 in the generic ballot. YouGov went D+4 to D+7. So all of the polls show some shift in the generic ballot towards the Democrats, who were already leading in going into the fall election. So things aren't totally fixed yet. They normally are. Usually 6 months prior to an election, you pretty much know who's going to win, and that's why the Republicans were so confident, and that's why they keep talking about gas prices and inflation, and they don't want to talk about Roe, Dobbs, and they don't want to talk about, what happened with the January 6th, the J6 committee hearings. They'll tell you none of it is important, nobody's watching, nobody's paying attention. All of that is bullshit. Everybody's paying attention, and in fact, things are still a little fluid. So definitely Republicans are favored in the House, but that doesn't mean that they're going to, get themselves a red wave. And nobody really knows what's going to go on in the Senate, particularly if senators run on I'm pro-choice.
True. Okay. Well, it's their.
As a matter of fact, I think it was the YouGov poll that said that if you had specifically a Democrat running as a pro-choice, and you had a Republican running as a pro-life or forced birth or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
There was a 15-point advantage for the Democrats.
Well,
So
all right.
this is a salient issue, shall we say. And again, I have to point out that most of the pundits and talking heads telling you that it doesn't really make that much difference and it won't really change minds are men.
True.
And so, you got to take pundits in context. And speaking of taking pundits in context, we were reminded of this wonderful piece written July 21st, 2021 by Chris Cillizza for CNN, the headline being Nancy Pelosi just doomed the already tiny chances of the January 6th committee actually mattering.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure.
Right. So ignore the pundits. It's always a good idea to ignore the pundits, but especially now.
What was the move that doomed the committee to irrelevance? Was it excluding the Republicans like Jim Jordan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking about the makeup of the committee.
Doomed.
Our friend Bosengood points out on Twitter, by the way, that having the hearing yesterday and alerting the perps that the committee was aware of witness tampering might have had some benefit in terms of getting further people to come out and testify. So that may have been the reason why they felt a little urgency about getting it done now.
Yeah, I guess so.
Not so much to threaten Cassidy, who was already testified, but what about the other people who are about to come out? What about Pat Cipollone, who's, probably got a cushy job, who doesn't want that job threatened?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I still don't know if I understand exactly the urgency, but it's a good day, as good a day as any to demonstrate that they're aware of witness tampering. I think they could have done that in 2 weeks, but why I guess if there's anybody that wonders
if they want them to come out in the next 2 weeks, then you got to do it now.
If there's anyone who wonders whether or not the committee is aware, and why have them sweat 2 weeks when you could just tell them, no, we know. But, okay. It's certainly
right. So I think the landscape is changing. And not necessarily for the benefit of the Republicans. And so this little tidbit report will get your interest, I'm sure. Glenn Youngkin meets with mega donors, says Laura Bozzella, amid hints he's mulling a White House bid.
What else is he going to mull?
Yeah, I mean, he's a limited one-termer because that's the way Virginia law is. Yes. But, it's you're no longer the new hot kid on the block, a year later. And especially when things are looking bad for the Republicans in general, both because of the January 6th committee and because of Roe. So the Supreme Court isn't helping Republicans win at the ballot box, other than suppressing votes directly.
Yes.
Like their latest ruling that says that Louisiana can gerrymander all they want to. We're not going to do anything about it.
True. All right.
But as far as what the general public thinks about what Republicans are doing, they're not happy with it.
They ought not to be. It's well-founded there. Oh, look.
And I do not buy for a minute the idea that, none of this will make a difference. It all makes a difference.
Yeah, that's certainly not panning out.
You know that it makes a difference because Republicans are working so hard to tell you it won't make a difference.
Right. Look at the gas prices.
Look at the gas prices, exactly.
All right, true. I'm now distracted by another comment from Twitter, but all the reports being circulated and recirculated now, reporters saying the same method of expressing it too. A source close to the Secret Service. Nobody's close to the Secret Service, really.
Well, here's the better one. Peter Alexander reports, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi tells me, quote, the Secret Service has communicated to DHS Gov, that any and all personnel, I guess they answer to the Homeland Security Department.
Sounds reasonable. Okay.
The Secret Service has communicated to Homeland Security that any and all personnel that the January 6th committee requests are available to testify under oath.
Okay.
Fine. Get them under oath.
Yeah. Well, sure.
If they haven't already.
Right.
Because Engel already has.
The earlier report from Peter Alexander was that, again, the source close to the Secret Service, which has got everybody up in arms. What does that even mean?
Yeah, and I think that was taken down when I saw it.
Still here now. But says that both men involved, both of the agents, I guess, dispute that Trump grabbed the steering wheel or assaulted an agent, right? All of that. but our
Trump tried to
good friend-
strangle me as I
Right.
was wearing my red blazer. They dispute that he was wearing a red blazer.
That may be. But true exercise in what we were just trying to parse out before, right? So they deny it. They do not deny that Trump was irate and demanded that they drive to the Capitol, which is the important part for you. But our friend Bob will speak on Twitter pointing out, just for the record, that, hey, Peter, this is hearsay. Just in case you're interested in anything like that. If that matters at all, which it doesn't because it's not happening in court, but telling me that a source close to the Secret Service says that both men said something about what happened in the car, well, they're going to have to testify if we want us to accept it, because we were told by the House Judiciary Committee that hearsay
it wasn't the
was an
beast because it
important
was the
rule.
SUV, not the limo. And besides, it's, what's the difference between a clip and a magazine? It's all
Right.
garbage.
Take out the mags. No, he meant take out the clips. So that's wrong, and he has to be, I think he's 25th Amendment it out.
Right.
If he's
Now, this is the
throwing
part where I get to say I'm not a lawyer and none of this matters.
You've said that. But it's another place where you can say that. Go on.
Well, again, it's a question of talking to the public, speaking to the public, and what the public hears and what the public remembers and what the public cares about. And what they
Right.
care about,
I'm public.
that very dramatic ketchup on the wall thing.
What kind
None
of
of that is particularly relevant to a prosecution. But boy, is it a great story.
It is. That's true. Everyone can sympathize with ketchup on the wall.
And you can visualize it.
Uh-huh. That's true. And if I find out that it was Hunt's ketchup, I'm never voting for him again.
Right. There's some great political cartoons on that, too. Basically they all have a variant of lock him up written on the wall in ketchup.
That's just the way it came out. So I wonder what, no one has told me what he was eating. I mean, besides the ketchup.
Oh, it's a cheeseburger, probably.
Was it? All right. Just a hamburger with.
Yeah. The hamburger. Yeah,
Yeah.
but the important thing is he broke the plate.
Oh. Well,
That's
then, yeah.
taxpayer money, buddy.
I know, really, seriously. That's going to look really interesting in the White House China collection. It's like a crazy glued plate with ketchup stains on it as the Trump.
Well, what they'll do is
The
they'll
Trump
glue
China.
it so that one side is up and
China.
one side is down, and then they'll call that the Trump plate.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that being added to the roundup. All right. Man, that's. Well, what can you do?
Right, and so
I find it bizarre.
that was the basic news from yesterday
Yes.
that was most interesting. I'll just add this because it's all peripherally part of the story, and we did talk about this a little bit. This is Judd Legume writing in Popular Information, and the headline says it all: Ron Johnson lied.
Yes.
Not
What-
Boris Johnson, Ron Johnson.
Right. What? Why? What did he lie about?
Well,
mean,
text
the whole
messages
thing.
released by the January 6th committee last week revealed that Senator Ron Johnson tried to deliver a list of fake electors directly to former Vice President Mike Pence. This was part of a broader scheme to use Pence's ceremonial role overseeing the certification of the Electoral College to install Trump for a second term. And I would remind
Same
you,
lie.
that's why Trump wanted to get to the Capitol.
Yes. I wonder if he wanted to make. I did see a report that he might have wanted to try to make his way to the floor of the House, like to.
Yeah, I'll count the
interrupt.
ballots. I'll make a speech
That
while I
would have
do.
been so.
Well, he just wanted to make a
interesting,
speech. Yes, but
to say
why
the
was he
least.
there?
Right. But yeah, I saw a lot of discussion about that, and I don't know if I put aside the right reports about it, but lots of people stringing together other things. Apparently, other things entered into evidence along the way that we may have forgotten about, given that this was such spectacular evidence yesterday. But someone bringing up that Ali Alexander somehow had already arranged for a permitted stage on the Capitol grounds for January 6th. It never ended up getting used for anything, and the speculation being that this was meant for Trump to make his speech, that that might be in fact evidence that they pre-planned his arrival at the Capitol, and that's why he was so desperate to get there. He was expected, which would add a different angle, a different layer to things. The
Right.
fact that they couldn't pull it off isn't so great, but
Yeah. So let's get back to Ron Johnson here, and I just
maybe
want
it
to
is
give you
great.
the sequence of
Oh,
events.
yes,
This
all
is
right.
June
More lying.
21st, 2022. Alexa Henning, his spokesperson, says the senator had no involvement in the creation of an alternate slate of electors and had no foreknowledge it was going to be delivered to our office. This was staff to staff. his new chief of staff contacted the vice president's office. And there's, of course, the select committee exhibit that shows that his new chief of staff was trying to contact the vice president's office, and the vice president's chief of staff said, don't give it to him.
Go away. Get lost.
Okay. So Johnson reiterated his office was simply handed an envelope. Then, per the senator, says Robert Costa, on June 22nd, the next day, a House intern, name unknown, was able to get a packet of information on electors, author unknown, to the chief of staff of a powerful GOP senator, and then he nearly delivered it to the vice president of the United States to consider. And Johnson claimed he was basically unaware of what was going on, which is different than unaware of what was going on, and I suppose different than truly unaware of what was going on. But as it turns out, all of this is a lie. Judd Legum writes in an interview Thursday, Johnson acknowledged he coordinated with Dane County, Wisconsin attorney Jim Trupus and his chief of staff by text message that morning to get Pence the document. So that's pretty much a flat-out lie from beginning to end.
Yeah. Not looking great for him.
Right. And so Trupus represented Trump in recounts of the liberal Dane and Milwaukee counties and sought to throw out tens of thousands of ballots. Trupus was attempting to deliver the names of 10 Republicans who convened at the Wisconsin state capitol on December 14th and signed paperwork falsely claiming to be presidential electors for Trump. Johnson's friendly with Trupus, knew about the activities, and that's why he wanted to deliver the fake electors to Pence.
Right.
So Johnson introduced Trupus to his chief of staff to facilitate the arrangement. So Johnson's involved with the fake elector scheme, and should this come to prosecution, Ron Johnson's in trouble.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me if he were to end up in
So
trouble.
just wanted to follow up on that because it was just weird that Johnson was pretending to be on the phone with reporters so he didn't have to talk about any of this. Because that way you don't have to lie about it. But no, he got caught. So somebody saw the screen, the phone wasn't on, and said, hey, your phone isn't on, you have to talk to us. So he talked to them, and of course he lied.
You know, how hard is it to make it look like you're on the phone?
I don't know. You basically have to ignore people and keep walking.
Yeah. Don't slow down so they can see your screen. What's
Right.
wrong
Mark
with you?
Meadows has two phones. I mean, I guess a lot of these guys have two phones. One is for personal use, and the other is for professional use, as it were.
I thought it was just one for each ear, but I guess that makes more sense.
So,
my left ear phone.
if you're going to go through the trouble of actually assuming that record keeping matters and you're going to keep official stuff on one phone and encryption on one phone and the other phone is for your own personal use, that's for your campaign, et cetera, et cetera. But that's why Mark Meadows was reported to have two phones as
Rudy
Cassidy
Giuliani had
Hutchinson
11.
was trying to interrupt him, and he was on both phones. And there was a whole story about basically Mark Meadows ignoring her about the violence, and the only thing he wanted to be interrupted for was a call from Jim Jordan.
He likes Jim.
Yeah, so why is that? And remember, Jim Jordan said, when asked if you spoke to Trump that day,
Oh, yeah.
said, well, I don't know, I speak to him a lot of,
Can't remember.
a couple of times, can't remember.
Definitely. No, maybe, yes.
Well,
all right.
now
How
the
many
question is,
phones did you
okay,
speak
and
on?
what did you discuss with Mark Meadows? And by the way, was any of that have to do with what was going on at the Willard Hotel?
Well, lots of connections.
And why don't you do that
still
under
left
oath?
to illustrate here. Yeah, well, he won't do anything under oath. So he refuses to discuss it. He just wants to yell from behind the Judiciary Committee Republicans' Twitter account, apparently. All right. Well, I think, generally speaking, if you think that you're innocent of something, but you have more than, let's say, more than two phones, get rid of some of them because they're incriminating evidence. Just the fact that you have them is bad.
Right. Josh Marshall points out, by the way, Scott Perry,
Yes, three
From
phones.
Pennsylvania.
This guy, yeah.
Mark Meadows,
11
who was
phones.
chief of staff at the time of all of this, Jim Jordan.
100
How many
phones.
former or current heads of the Freedom Caucus have been involved in various levels of seditious conspiracy?
Oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. That's interesting. Yeah, the Freedom Caucus, they're dangerous. That's right.
Apparently.
They all have been. Okay.
And Sarah Longwell from the Bulwark points out, look, I know it sounds like what you're hearing is an indictment of Trump, and it is, but it's also an indictment of every Republican in Congress and out who supported and excused this despicable, thoroughly dishonorable man. And again, it takes a woman to come out to have the courage to testify. Fiona Hill comes to mind. But, there were men who had the courage to come out and testify, like Rusty Bowers, like Alexander Vindman at the time.
Right.
And, it's an indictment of everybody
Raleigh
who didn't have the guts to come out and do what was right.
True. It was
and
a
that's
big
what I'm
day
going to end my segment on, because
All
it's
right.
9:57.
Okay. Very good. Well timed then. I'll point out to you, you weren't here yesterday to hear me discover on the air that
Nobody was, as I heard.
Right, yes. That's true. Boy, I don't know. Somehow that felt like very painful to hear that, to be reminded of that. But Cassidy Hutchinson, a graduate and alumnus of Christopher Newport University.
There you go.
You were wondering about you were not wondering about her educational background, but much in the news these days. We call it out every time we see it. Ever since we learned about, let's see, Rachel Bidikofer's original affiliation there, certain other familial connections. Let's say.
Exactly.
Very interesting. But I wonder if they're going to hold her up now. They're very big on their, many schools are big on their honor code.
Yeah.
This will be great for their
Florida
honor code
man
materials.
had foreknowledge that there was going to be violence at a Florida paper.
Right. But he didn't speak out under the University of Florida's active honor code. So, oops, oh dear. Oh boy. Okay. I think I've hit the wrong button there. And we'll see whether we ruined anything or not. All right, Greg. Well, thanks very much. Appreciate your joining us, and we'll see how much damage I did by hitting the wrong button there. And we'll speak again tomorrow.
Everything but the last 30 seconds was erased.
Yeah, I think so. All right, I'm going to have to string together 2 files now. All right, well, we'll see whether we start getting complaints about being off the air. See you tomorrow. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I hope we're able to welcome you back. For some reason, as I was clicking through to try and get to the soundboard and the music, the normally very far recessed window at this stage of the game for the Nicecast stream, the app that we use to stream our audio out to Justice to put through to those of you listening live, that button popped up unexpectedly right in the place where my cursor dropped on the stop broadcast button. So we briefly hit that button, and I think though if we turned it right back on, that there's no reason why the stream wouldn't pick up as soon as we hit the start broadcast button. The only thing is that when I go to put the podcast together, ordinarily when I the recording would have turned off for that split second. I'm going to have to splice 2 recordings together, but I don't think that's going to cause too much trouble. Anyway, boy, there's an awful lot. And, yes, and a shout out from, I know we at least got back on the air at some point. I don't know, I can't remember where I hit the button, before or after I mentioned Christopher Newport University. Athena 5000 says, in my neck of the woods, Christopher Newport. So, yes, that's right. Some more connection to the story. And like I said, they take their honor code seriously at Christopher Newport University, in the sense that they have one, as many people do, and it's printed and people read about it and they talk about it at freshman orientation, and then never again, I think. Basically, that's the way it goes at most schools. But anyway, I thought it would make great PR materials for the school if indeed her testimony shakes out and makes the kind of difference that we all hope that it will. All right, let's see. Where do I want to go from here? Gosh, I don't know. But there's an awful lot out there in Pocket in the Twitter stream that I want to bring to your attention. Let me see if I can organize it on the fly. I'm feeling very disjointed about the way we're telling stories today. Let's see. Laura Rosen was tweeting this just yesterday, or is that this morning? I guess it counts as this morning, 12:45 a.m. this morning. But a thread in which she begins, did not absorb this until I rewatched today's hearing, but Hutchinson testified that there were discussions she witnessed between Meadows and Scott Perry and between Meadows and Giuliani about Trump holding a second speech on January 6th at the Capitol. Remember that they were trying desperately to get him to give some sort of remarks. But there were two competing, I guess, teams of people trying to get Trump to make some sort of remarks. There was the people who like to call themselves, I guess, Team Normal, although they were Team Bystanders, Team Timid Mouse, who wanted him to give a speech calling for the protesters to go home, to vacate the Capitol, to remain peaceful, to reject violence, etc. But what's being hinted at here is that Hutchinson says that, well, it's not hinted. She said it. Laura heard her say it. She just didn't pick up on it immediately. Hutchinson says she heard Meadows talking to both Scott Perry and Giuliani, probably separately, that the plan for January 6th included a Trump speech at the Capitol. So this is appended to a text that she has linked in here from Stephanie Kirschgassner, the investigative reporter at The Guardian, who tweets an opinion piece here. I don't know whether it's her own or not, from the Washington Post, but the opinion piece saying, bombshell hearing raises a question. Why was Trump's lawyer terrified? Well, I don't recall this piece, so let's go take a look at the underlying piece here so we can get some idea of what we're looking at. It's not surprisingly, Plumline piece from Paul Waldman and Greg Sargent, both taking the byline on this one. Bombshell hearing raises a question. Why was Trump's lawyer terrified? And perhaps we ought to read that. We'll see whether we need it after we read through this Laura Rosen thread here, just to set the stage. I'm not certain what it was about that piece that prompted Laura to write, because it's interesting. I've read through the top of the thread, and I don't see why this would be attached, quite honestly, but maybe it will make some more sense out of it by reading on. So again, she says she didn't absorb it until she rewatched the hearing, that Hutchinson says that both Perry and Giuliani separately talked to Meadows about holding this second speech at the Capitol. I had mentioned Ali Alexander. I think this is where that came from. Hutchinson is quoted here as saying, I remember hearing a few different ideas discussed with Mark and Scott Perry, Mark and Rudy Giuliani. I don't know which conversations were elevated to the president. I don't know what he personally wanted to do when he went up to the Capitol that day. I know that there were discussions about him, that being Trump, having another speech outside the Capitol before going in. Going in. Wow. I knew that there was a conversation about him going into the House chamber at one point. And the president, in case you were wondering, I believe, does have floor privileges at the House of Representatives. We don't... you would think that we'd be interested in, as a separation of powers matter, departing from that, or not allowing that, or taking the example of the English, who are very, as I understand it, are very protective of letting, permitting the monarch to enter Parliament and to enter the House of Commons. Only happens on rare occasions and by invitation. But here in the United States, apparently, it's a thing that they permit the president floor privileges. So at least he wouldn't be breaking the rules on a day when he was holding an insurrection. We can't have that happening. At any rate, but interesting, one, that there were discussions about him giving a second speech, and two, that he might even have had plans to enter the Capitol and go onto the House floor during the joint session after the speech. It goes on to say, Hutchinson recounted a phone call from Kevin McCarthy on the 6th during the Trump's ellipse speech, so not yet during the siege of the Capitol itself, where McCarthy said that the White House had promised that Trump would not come to the Capitol, and accusing the White House of then lying to him because Trump had just said in his ellipse speech that he would walk with his supporters to the Capitol, which was a lie because he doesn't walk anywhere, but okay. But that's interesting that without going where Lauren is going to go with this, I just want to point out that it's interesting that McCarthy is watching the ellipse speech live and in close enough detail that, one, he hears Trump saying he's going to march to the Capitol with his supporters. Two, he believes that Trump means it, that he will, in fact, march to the Capitol with his supporters. Although perhaps even McCarthy was aware at the time. He's saying he's going to arrive here. Whether or not he actually walks is neither here nor there. He says he's going to come to the Capitol, but that's upsetting to me because I had assurances from the White House before that he would not do this and that he would stay away from the Capitol, which, interesting also in its own right, because what does McCarthy know about what's going on, and why would he care whether the president comes to the Capitol or not? I mean, it's unusual, and it would possibly create a disturbance for the president under any circumstances, even President Biden, to just show up more or less unplanned, unannounced at the Capitol. It causes a lot of problems. So I suppose on that level you could be concerned about it, but more to the point, it's probably pretty good, at least circumstantial evidence that McCarthy had some pretty good idea that violence or at least chaos was going to ensue from the march of his supporters up the street to the Capitol, whether he arrives or not, whether Trump goes with them or not. If he goes with them, it's that much worse. But why would McCarthy have sought out promises from the White House ahead of time, ahead of the ellipse speech even, that Trump wouldn't make an appearance on the Capitol grounds? That's highly suspicious. So, at any rate, where were we with this? Hutchinson recounted this phone call from McCarthy, in which McCarthy is accusing the White House of lying to him because he heard that he was told that Trump wouldn't come to the Capitol, but in his speech he just said that he was going to go. But she recounted that ahead of January 6th, she had heard conversations between Meadows and Scott Perry, and between Meadows and Giuliani, planning for Trump to give a second speech on the 6th at the Capitol. Okay, the second speech here being the ellipse speech, and then he was going to make a speech at the Capitol, the front end of the march and the back end of the march. Now I see what we're talking about here. It seems Meadows was telling McCarthy that Trump would not come to the Capitol, while he was telling Scott Perry he would. And even as Trump was heading on stage for the ellipse speech on the 6th, Meadows told Trump that he was working on it. Hutchinson testified yesterday that he was working on what? Making arrangements for getting him to the Capitol to give that second speech. I had been confused because I thought that the first speech that they were talking about was the forced video release via Twitter of "Everyone loves you, you're very special, go home." No, the first speech here was the ellipse speech. I mean, that seems pretty obvious in hindsight. I can't believe I missed that, but I don't know. I tend to block out Trump speeches at this point. But I guess here, the point of this thread would be to illustrate that there was at some point in all of this a plan to have Trump launch the insurrection from the ellipse and capstone the insurrection at the Capitol. I guess to declare the Capitol finally conquered and him back in charge. Ali Alexander gets mentioned in the comments to this thread. John Sarvey is, just a regular guy here, and commenting alongside in response to Laura's thread, and I guess he must have read it from a retweeted version of it from our friend NYC Southpaw, because the reply is to both of them. And he says, remember that Ali Alexander had secured a permit and had a stage and sound system in place for a gathering outside the east wing of the Capitol, not the east wing of the White House, but the east wing of the Capitol on the morning of January 6th. It sat unused, perhaps because Trump never arrived. East wing of the Capitol, though. I'm not quite certain that that's a terminology that I'm familiar with, to be honest. There's an east front of the Capitol and a west front of the Capitol. The wings of the Capitol are oriented, therefore, more or less, you might conclude, more or less north-south. Although, I don't know how it appears on the map, actually. Let me take a quick look here. But I'm certainly well aware of the fact that they refer to the fronts of the Capitol in terms of east and west. And I guess, let's look at the satellite of the Capitol area. Yeah, so, the map here being oriented north-south, there's no real east wing, so I'm not really sure what. They might have been talking about the east front. Now, the way to differentiate for those of you who are at least passingly familiar with the Capitol and how it looks on video and film and the way you see it in the movies, the west front is the side facing the National Mall where they now do the inaugurations. They set up the scaffolding there so that there's the National Mall in the backdrop and you can see the Washington Monument, etc. The east front is where they have the famous, the big steps up the front and where cars can pull right up and members can jump out. That's paved parking lot. Whereas the west front is, there's a little plaza and then it's out to the grass and the various reflecting pools and Washington Monument, etc. So in the east, I imagine that's probably where a stage would be set up. They probably meant the east front, not the east wing. But never mind that, just a mistake of terminology here. But as he was saying, he had a permit for a stage and a sound system in place for a gathering outside the Capitol on the morning of January 6th. It sat unused, perhaps because Trump never arrived. Laura Rosen just saying, I did not know that. And let's see. Somebody else says, I posted above. He tells the story in his video around 9 minutes in. And I guess it's video of, I don't know what circumstances in which Ali Alexander is describing his day. So, okay, very interesting. Something to think about. And whether or not they can connect Ali Alexander's mysteriously unused stage and sound system to Trump's intention of arriving at the Capitol for a triumphant speech at the end of his insurrection. That could be. All right, let's see. Now I wonder whether there's anything of interest. Now I'm curious about going back to the plumb line piece to see whether there's any connective tissue here, why Laura Rosen uses it as a launching pad. Remember that the title here is Bombshell Hearing Raises a Question. Why was Trump's lawyer terrified? And now I would like to know as well. The testimony delivered Tuesday to the committee, I'm going to abbreviate things just a little bit here, to the committee by Cassidy Hutchinson was full of bombshells, but one may have escaped some people's notice. The moment she describes White House counsel Pat Cipollone, who I'm increasingly thinking sounds like a deli meat of some kind, a pound of Cipollone, half a pound of gabagool, something like that. Go to the Italian deli and get some Cipollone. Anyway, the moment she describes White House counsel Pat Cipollone warning about the criminal liability that then President Donald Trump and others might face as the mob descended on the Capitol. Hutchinson's testimony had many dramatic moments. There was the revelation that Trump expressly wanted metal detectors removed so that supporters who were armed could join in the rally crowd. They got some proof work to do on that one, of course. But anyway, all he has to do is, he'll show up in court if it even comes to that and say, I wanted those things removed, not so that they could come in armed, but so that they could come in unimpeded and get in faster and there would be more people in there. I didn't know whether they were armed, but I wasn't concerned if they were because I knew that they were there as supporters, which is an awfully stupid thing to do for yourself, quite honestly. But, what do I care about his safety? That doesn't bother me. But at any rate, they got more proof proving of the matter, I guess, to do before you can get to the conclusion that he wanted them there armed for the purpose of bringing them to the Capitol as an army. But all right. Hutchinson's testimony had the many dramatic moments. There was that part. There was the incredible scene of him grabbing the wheel of the presidential limousine when the Secret Service refused to take him to the Capitol, and testimony that Meadows and Trump legal advisor Rudy Giuliani sought presidential pardons in the aftermath. Okay. Trump, in a social media post on Tuesday, denies the allegations, of course, but on the morning of the insurrection, Hutchinson testified Cipollone urged her to prevent Trump from going to the Capitol. With the growing, seething crowd of protesters that he had assembled nearby, Hutchinson described the scene this way. Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen. Oh, really? Good. Keep in mind that one of Cipollone's jobs at the White House Counsel was to keep people who work in the White House, including the president, from committing crimes, something that, according to Hutchinson, he was clearly worried about. Notably, Cipollone's fear intensified as January 6th wore on. Hutchinson testified that as the riot spun out of control, Cipollone came barreling down the hallway towards our office to tell Meadows that they had to talk to the president. She continued, and Mark looked up and said, he doesn't want to do anything, Pat. Cipollone then replied, Mark, something needs to be done or people are going to die and the blood is going to be on your effing hands. This is getting out of control. I'm going down there. As illuminating as it would be to hear from him, Cipollone has refused to cooperate with the committee. So, what exactly did Cipollone fear here? It's possible, of course, that in the last reported exchange, Cipollone was merely expressing his horror as an American at what was about to happen, not his assessment as a lawyer. But recall that days earlier, Cipollone had reportedly raised specific concerns about legal exposure relating to the Capitol. In a discussion on January 3rd, Hutchinson testified Cipollone urgently warned that Trump going to the Capitol on January 6th would raise serious legal concerns. Hutchinson and Cipollone had conversations about possible statutes that might be implicated, she said. While it's not entirely clear which statutes they discussed, we should find that out, don't you think? A reasonable guess based on Hutchinson's testimony is obstruction of official proceedings, that being the count of the electoral vote, and conspiracy to defraud the United States, which would be, of course, conspiring to obstruct the electoral count, a lawful function of government. And so, when Cipollone saw the mob of Trump supporters heading to the Capitol and rushed down the White House hall to warn Meadows that this has to be stopped, he might have had legal concerns in mind. It seems like if he was potentially thinking in legal terms, he was thinking about obstruction of Congress and conspiracy to defraud the U.S. Randall Eliason, specialist in white-collar crime law, told us. I don't know whether he was thinking about the defrauding the U.S. part, but okay. Certainly the obstruction was a possibility. What's critical here is that Trump and his advisors have never conceded that the mob assault on the Capitol was in any way connected to his efforts to procedurally overturn the election, which they don't concede was criminal or wrong either, but put that aside for now. Yet Cipollone clearly seemed to see Trump's manipulation of the mob as directly linked to the president's efforts to subvert the electoral count, which Cipollone seemed to see as potential criminality. This was what was so devastating about today, Eliason says, noting that Tuesday's hearing provided the most direct evidence yet tying Trump's machinations directly to the mob and the violence. Neil Katyal, former U.S. Solicitor General, notes that when Hutchinson testified that Trump expressly wanted supporters carrying weapons led into the rally on the Ellipse, that might have also pointed to legal vulnerability. I'm not certain that they established that. The picture painted today is one of Trump assisting with an insurrection, Katyal told us, noting that this could implicate the federal statute against rebellion or insurrection, or lending aid and comfort to either. In fact, the one I keep pointing to about setting on foot an insurrection, in telling them to march to the Capitol and telling them he would march with them, and having done so knowing that some of them may be armed, either in the crowd among the crowd listening to his speech on the ellipse because of his demands about the metal detectors being removed, or assembled outside just beyond the reach of the metal detectors where they could join the march. Anyway, what's still unclear is whether Trump saw the use of the mob to pressure his vice president as part of the plan all along in the days leading up to January 6th, or whether he came to see the violence as a weapon in real time as it developed. But as Eliason notes, even if it's the latter, that might not necessarily be exonerating. After all, Trump refused to call off the mob for more than 3 hours, helping lead to horrifying destruction and death, apparently as part of a broader effort to disrupt the election's conclusion. The failure to try to stop it and the encouraging of it is further evidence of the overall conspiracy to obstruct, Eliason said. He sat on his hands, as small as they are, during the 3 hours of the attack, giving massive assistance to the insurrectionists storming the Capitol, Katyal said. And keep this in mind. The January 6th committee vice chair, Cheney, concluded by saying that during the next hearings, the committee will detail still more about what Trump did while the violence raged. Things will get worse for Trump. Okay, interesting article in its own right. Still a question in my mind as to why Laura Rosen cites it or attaches it to the first tweet in her thread. Just to remind myself, that was her saying, did not absorb it until rewatched today's hearing, but Hutchinson testified there were discussions between Meadows, Perry, and Giuliani about Trump holding a second speech. Okay. I mean, I guess. But I guess if there were plans for him holding a second speech, I guess that speaks to knowledge beforehand of exactly, or some pretty clear idea of what was going to go down, and that it was the capstone to events at the Capitol as he envisioned it, even though Laura doesn't know anything about Ali Alexander and his stage until someone else says so. Okay, interesting. I think we can absorb all of that. Let's see. Yes, interesting story, as I mentioned when Greg brought it up, from the Daily Beast. Indicted election denier Tina Peters loses her own election and denies she lost. I'd like to take a look at that one. And that makes more relevant and just all sadder that we didn't get a chance to read the earlier press about Tina Peters and what she was up to earlier in the week. But the good news is that the basics of those earlier stories was, one, that Tina Peters is a total election conspiracy theory kook. Two, there was the hint that Lauren Boebert may have had something to do with egging her on to commit the crimes that she committed. And three, that she was nonetheless standing for election as Secretary of State of Colorado, aiming to have herself put in charge of administering elections in that state, which would be a huge, huge mistake and a huge step towards what we've been concentrating on Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania and that end of the plan. But mentioning that people were running all over the country for Secretary of State or governorships on the explicit promise that next time they would legitimize the insurrection by either refusing to sign electoral vote counts or agreeing to sign fake ones, or in the meantime tampering with elections in ways such that it would guarantee at least a false record purporting to speak to the election of Republicans and the defeat of all Democrats who might be seeking office. So anyway, the good news is she doesn't make it out of the primary. And the funny way of telling it, I guess, is up to the Daily Beast. Tina Peters, the Colorado County clerk who flogged election conspiracy theories and was then indicted for allegedly breaching her own voting machines, right? lost her primary bid to become Secretary of State. So a near thing for the country and the state. Undone. That's good news. And then she did exactly, of course, what you would expect. She denied that she lost, cried fraud, and vowed to keep fighting. It's not over, Peters reportedly told supporters at her watch party, while she was 15 points behind the actual winner, Pam Anderson, funny enough, a former Jefferson County clerk. Peters' loss will be a blow to a cast of her fellow election deniers, including prominently Mike Lindell.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Ed Roots Radio, and we are here. That's good news. So far, so good. We didn't knock ourselves off the air permanently, but boy, the whole control thing needs to be taken away from me. All right, let's see. Other things to add. That's pretty much the gist of the Daily Beast story. It's not an in-depth report other than saying she was in a dangerous kook and associated with dangerous kooky people and lost her bid for the in the primary for Secretary of State. So good news and good on the Republicans of Colorado not elevating her, although I don't know who they did elevate, and it may very well be that they just have a different election denier, but albeit one that's not already under indictment for tampering with voting machines. And you remember just how weird she was. What if you don't remember just how weird she was? Well, maybe that's the thing to do next. Read The Strange Tale of Tina Peters, as told in the New York Times just the other day by Nick Corasaniti and Alexandra Berzon. I don't know why I keep thinking that Nick's last name is Corasanti, and maybe it is pronounced that way, or maybe it's just I've been listening to people who mispronounce the name, but someone can tell me about that one, or maybe I could look up a YouTube of an interview with the guy and see what's up. Anyway, the point is that he wrote this story, and the story is what I want to tell you. The Strange Tale of Tina Peters, the county clerk, the subheader reads, has been consumed by election conspiracy theories, lionized by a movement, and indicted in a bizarre scheme. Will Republicans nominate her to run elections in Colorado? Good question. Good answer, too. No, turns out, is the answer. But see how close you came to disaster by reading this story. Let's see. Just 6 weeks before the 2020 presidential election, game day for vote-counting bureaucrats. 6 weeks before the election, game day for vote-counting bureaucrats. Okay. Tina Peters was so proud of her operation at the Mesa County Clerk's office that she invited a film crew in. Everybody's inviting film crews. Right now, you should just get indicted if you call a film crew and say, think about coming by, seize your computers, search your crawl space. That's a criminal right there. Anyway, if they're Republican. Just to really round it out there. Okay, well, at any rate, she was so proud of her operation at the Mesa County Clerk's office, she invited a film crew in to show off. Okay, show it off. There's no chance of mishap here, she boasted. The Russians can't hack into and start casting votes for someone, she said, as a few in the office chuckled. Interesting. By May 2021, it was Ms. Peters, not the Russians, who had helped engineer an audacious breach of voting machines, according to an indictment charging her with 7 felonies. You remember this woman, and of course you remember the old standby that explains all of this. Every Republican accusation is a confession. Turns out that she was doing exactly what she says she was worried about the Russians doing. And just to prove that she wasn't going to let the Russians in, she was going to break in first so that there was no room for them to break in. I don't know what the plan was. Anyway, Ms. Peters arranged to copy sensitive election software from county voting machines in an attempt to prove the 2020 presidential election was rigged, according to court records. Prosecutors said she committed identity theft and criminal impersonation and violated the duties of her office in the process. Ms. Peters has pleaded not guilty. I wonder if there's any discussion. I need a reminder of what the time she got involved in an altercation in a Starbucks over this stuff. Remember that? All right. Anyway, maybe it's in here because it is the strange tale. The strange tale of Tina Peters, a once ordinary public servant consumed by conspiracy theories and catapulted to minor stardom by believers, will take its next twist on Tuesday, that was yesterday, when voters decide whether to make the indicted public official the Republican nominee for Secretary of State, the top election official in Colorado. Polls are sparse in the primary race, but Ms. Peters is considered a contender. And thank God she lost because, again, the implications here being what was yesterday crazy conspiracy theory that will get you indicted becomes tomorrow if you win the election and, you're handed the great seal of the state of Colorado and can put your imprimatur on anything you want, then the crazy conspiracy theory suddenly becomes state policy. That's no good. Can't have that and survive. Anyway, Ms. Peters did not just stumble into the world of election conspiracy theories. Oh, no. A review of public statements and interviews with people involved in her case showed she was repeatedly assisted by a loose network of election deniers, some of whom worked alongside Donald J. Trump's legal team to try to subvert the presidential election in 2020. They are still working to undermine confidence in elections today. That network's involvement is just one of several bizarre plot points in Ms. Peters' case. The Mesa County breach involved a former surfer who was dressed as a computer, quote, nerd, and made a FaceTime call during the operation, reporting by the New York Times shows. I'm not certain what the FaceTime call thing is supposed to be about, except maybe, videoing and distributing video of the inner workings of the things they were breaking into, I suppose. Afterward, the crew shared their loot, images of voting machine data at a conference streamed online, advertising the efforts to thousands. On Friday, Ms. Peters told the Times that her congresswoman, Representative Lauren Boebert, quote, encouraged me to go forward with the imaging. Boy, oh boy. A press officer from Ms. Boebert, a Republican, called the claim false. Through it all, Ms. Peters has parlayed the episode into a national political profile on the right, speaking at events across the country where she's considered a hero. Influential election deniers have come to her aid. Mike Lindell, the MyPillow executive who supports a stable of lawyers and researchers promoting bogus theories, says he has funneled as much as $200,000 to Ms. Peters' legal defense. Others, including Patrick Byrne, a former Overstock executive, right, Overstock.com, have run ads attacking her primary opponent. Good, they're burning their money. That's nice. In a statement to the Times, Ms. Peters declined to answer specific questions about the episode, citing pending litigation. In September, before Ms. Peters was indicted, her lawyer acknowledged that she had allowed one non-employee, that's enclosed in quotes, like I guess that's supposed to be, well, just one non-employee, to copy hard drives. Just a wee crime, but argued that there was no rule or regulation against it, something the Secretary of State's office disputes, right? The current Secretary of State of Colorado says, actually it is against the law to copy the hard drives of the voting machines. So the solution to that, of course, is run for Secretary of State so that I can be the person that says whether or not it's against the law to do this. I did it, But one of the things I could do is run for the office that decides whether or not I'm going to be prosecuted for it, and then undo my prosecution. In public appearances since, Ms. Peters has said she made the copies because she worried the voting machine company was going to delete computer systems that recorded the 2020 election, and she wanted to preserve the records. She has been less forthcoming about how the material ended up online. The people want to know how our elections have been turned over to machines with no oversight, transparency, or real security in any meaningful way, Ms. Peters said in the statement. Materials released in the Mesa County breach have been used to fuel the churn of misinformation about President Biden's victory. Election experts say the episode also highlights a growing vulnerability in election security, the insider threat. Since the Mesa County breach was made public, there have been more than half a dozen reports of local election officials taking similar actions. Election conspiracy theory promoters claim there are more out there. Experts say the danger is that the very people trusted to carry out elections could release confidential information and undermine security measures. It's a new and frankly more discouraging threat, said Christopher Krebs, who ran the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Department of Homeland Security from 2018 to 2020, under Trump. Institutionally, we've lost a bit of a North Star in terms of how elections are conducted. Tina Peters' 2018 election to clerk and recorder of Mesa County, a Republican stronghold amid the canyons of western Colorado, was her first foray into public office. A former flight attendant who ran a construction company with her husband, Ms. Peters made her top campaign issue the reopening of local divisions of motor vehicles satellites offices, a promise she fulfilled quickly. But she had more trouble with election administration. 3 months after the 2019 election, more than 500 ballots were found uncounted in a drop box outside the county election office. In the 2020 presidential primary, completed ballots were found blowing in the wind near the clerk's office, according to the Daily Sentinel, the newspaper in Grand Junction. By July 2020, residents had begun a recall effort to remove her from office, but they failed to obtain enough signatures. Although that's interesting, because who determines whether enough signatures have been obtained? And the answer probably is Tina Peters does. The general election in Mesa County in 2020 went off smoothly, with no complaints of fraud or other delays, yet the conspiracy theories spouted by Mr. Trump quickly took hold in this deeply red county, and county commissioners were soon inundated with calls from constituents questioning the results. Ms. Peters eventually rejected requests to hand count the ballots in her own county, where Mr. Trump won 62% of the vote. But she began to express doubts about the national results. She connected with a local group organized by Ms. Boebert's former campaign manager that met regularly to swap theories. In April 2021, the group hosted Douglas Frank, a high school math and science teacher in Ohio, whose debunked theories have been influential with election conspiracists. After seeing Mr. Frank's presentation, Ms. Peters invited him to attend an upcoming trusted build of the county election equipment, according to court records. The process is essentially a software update performed in a secure location by officials from the Secretary of State's office and employees of Dominion Voting Systems, the voting machine manufacturer that election skeptics have come to believe erases critical election data. It does not. Mr. Frank did not accept the offer, but another member of the election denier network did attend, according to court records and interviews. Conan Hayes was a former pro surfer, there are such things, who had worked with Mr. Trump's legal team as it challenged the 2020 results. Sure, why not? In 2021, Mr. Byrne paid him around $200,000 to continue his work for the year, according to Mr. Byrne. Is that the Overstock guy, Byrne? According to an account from Mr. Byrne and confirmed by Mr. Hayes, he attended the trusted build on May 25th, 2021. Mr. Hayes called Mr. Byrne from inside the Mesa County election offices, speaking in a hushed voice and explaining that he'd been invited to make backup copies of machines by a government official who thought that a cover-up was underway. Mr. Burns said. That, of course, would be Peters. When the two spoke over FaceTime, Mr. Byrne saw Mr. Hayes was dressed like a computer nerd. What a dumb thing to say, and wearing someone else's identification tag, Mr. Byrne said. Aha, that's interesting. Ms. Peters had introduced a contractor at the event and identified him as Gerald Wood, a local IT consultant, according to court records. The real Mr. Wood, however, told investigators that he was not there that day, or 2 days earlier when his badge was used to enter a secure area. So they stole that and gave it to Wood, Mr. Hayes has, Wood is the actual guy. They stole Wood's ID and gave it to Hayes, who was dressed like a computer nerd. I think that's interesting, just from a perspective of I need to go in disguise here. I need to look a certain way in order to pretend I'm a computer consultant. Mr. Hayes has not been charged and is not named in the indictment, though a judge's order did identify him as later receiving a package in the mail from Ms. Peters. In a brief phone interview, Mr. Hayes said Mr. Burns' account was accurate. Patrick is pretty clear on things, he said. All right, let's continue on. Ms. Peters didn't speak in detail about the incident, though she alluded to acting on her worries about the election in a meeting with a county commissioner over the summer. She talked about these white hat guys, and she talked about having someone brought in to look at the computers, and that she now believed that there was some compromise to the machines, recalled Janet Rowland, or Rowland, I'm not sure how she pronounces it, a Republican and county commissioner in Mesa County, and that was when she used the phrase, I think even twice in that one meeting, I've seen things I can't unsee. In early August, passwords to the Mesa County election equipment appeared on a QAnon figure's Telegram channel and then a right-wing website, leading to an investigation by the Secretary of State, which of course got her in trouble, right? So now she wants to be Secretary of State so that can go away. Days later, Mesa County's breach found an even bigger spotlight at a cyber symposium in South Dakota, organized by Lindell. Who was it we were reading about? One of the guys who actually went to that thing and then got COVID there. And is that the guy from Wisconsin who's conducting the audit, right? The former Supreme Court justice there. I forgot. I'm blanking on his name, even though I've called it out 100 times. But anyway, that's interesting. Another stupid connection between these stories. After one of Mr. Lindell's other wild claims, which Mr. Hayes had also worked on, fizzled, he changed the conversation. Ms. Peters appeared on stage to tell her story, and the Mesa County conspiracy was born. As part of Ms. Peters' legal defense, information copied in Mesa County was soon packaged into a series of 3 reports purporting to show corruption in the election system. They were pumped through the online forums and promoted at in-person meetings. Mesa County soon overtook other discredited theories, such as the fictions about improprieties in Antrim County, Michigan, that Mr. Trump eagerly promoted. It's interesting that all these theories develop in places that Trump normally wins and won overwhelmingly in 2020, but somehow the anomalies are manifesting there. In fact, some of the same figures were involved in crafting both conspiracy theories. Mr. Hayes had helped to obtain the Antrim County information, and a cybersecurity firm, Allied Security Operations Group, that wrote the debunked Antrim analysis also produced the Mesa County reports for Ms. Peters' legal team, according to the firm's leader. There is no evidence the group was involved in the Mesa County breach. Mr. Byrne calls the reports the Rosetta Stone for us to prove the whole thing, but experts say they reveal no problems at all. 2 of the 3 reports don't even suggest issues with election results, and instead draw false conclusions about the vulnerability of elections machines by misinterpreting certain laws and procedures, said Matt Crane, executive director of the Colorado County Clerks Association, who has studied the reports closely. A 3rd report claims to show anomalies in 2 Mesa County elections, but the issues were caused by human error, and there was no evidence that any vote counts were improper, according to the Mesa County District Attorney's Office, which did an extensive investigation. In February, Ms. Peters decided to try to turn her celebrity into political power, announcing a bid for Secretary of State, although I don't know whether it was so much motivated by turning her celebrity into more political power as it was about trying to occupy the office that could dismiss all charges against her and make her conspiracy theory official policy. She made appearances on Stephen Bannon's podcast and linked up with a group of far-right candidates for Secretary of State across the country. She secured a speaking slot at a rally held by Trump in Wyoming. In March, Ms. Peters was indicted on 10 criminal counts related to the effort to copy voting equipment software, including attempting to influence a public servant, criminal impersonation, conspiracy to commit criminal impersonation, identity theft, and first-degree official misconduct. That's a lot. On the campaign trail, Ms. Peters says the charges are politically motivated. She has claimed the investigation is part of a globalist takeover and casts herself as a martyr for a cause. I went to jail for you, and I will continue to do it. Oh, you'll continue to go to jail, that's for sure. She told a group of election activists in Texas in April. Ms. Peters has declined to say who is paying her lawyers, but has directed people wanting to support her legal efforts to donate to the Lindell Legal Offense Fund, not defense, but offense fund, which Mr. Lindell says he uses for various lawsuits and projects. In the closing days of the campaign, Ms. Peters has received other assistance. A new super PAC in Colorado called Citizens for Election Integrity has spent roughly $100,000 on advertisements attacking Pam Anderson, one of Ms. Peters' opponents for the Republican nomination, according to campaign finance disclosures. I wonder what the attacks are. Doesn't matter, she won, but I'd like to know what the attacks are. She is, after all, the Republican nominee. The group recently received a $100,000 donation from the America Project, a group founded by Mr. Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, another figure in the right and in the fight to overturn the 2020 election, and from Mr. Byrne. Of course, he's also a notorious spy, not certain whether Byrne himself is. Okay. Well, that is a bizarre tale. That brings you up to speed, and now at least you know that the danger for the moment is over in terms of her assuming this office through legal means. We'll see whether this is her last crack at it or not, and whether she might just as well attempt to take over the office by force at some point in the near future. Who knows? All right, let's see. Let's save this perhaps for Friday, and we'll squeeze in one more January 6th story. Hugo Lowell, again, reporting in The Guardian. January 6th testimony puts Donald Trump in even greater legal peril. Let's see if there's any new news in this one. I like to see if we can tie it all together. Former president and senior aide face exposure over knowledge that supporters were armed and intended to march on the Capitol. Let's see if he puts together any more proof than the others, because I still think there's gaps in this case. Donald Trump and his two closest advisors could face widening criminal exposure over the Capitol attack after ex-White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified about their potentially unlawful conduct to the House committee at a special hearing on, well, it says Thursday, but they mean Tuesday. The testimony revolved around the disclosure, one of several major revelations from Hutchinson, that the former president directed supporters to descend on the Capitol, even though he knew they were armed and probably intended to cause harm. I still think this might be a leap. I mean, it's probably a good leap to make, and you should see if you can fill in the facts in between, but we may be out ahead of ourselves here. Hutchinson testified under oath that Trump was deeply angered by the fact that some of his supporters who had gathered on a national mall were not entering the secure perimeter for the Save America rally at the Ellipse, where he was due to make remarks. The supporters did not want to enter the security perimeter, of course. Hutchinson testified because many were armed with knives, blades, pepper spray, and, as it later turned out, guns, and did not want to surrender their weapons to the Secret Service to attend the rally. It's funny, the reaction from the right has been, this is all lies, they didn't have any guns. Prove that they had guns. And although there is now proof that there were definitely some guns present on January 6th on the Capitol grounds, some of which had been stashed away, or other guns, I guess, stashed away off grounds, etc. All problematic, but I don't think anybody on the right so far, as I know, is denying that they were there with like pepper spray and such. And a lot of those things come in metal canisters, and that would have been detected by the metal detectors, and the Secret Service would surely have made you give up your mace at the security perimeter. But they were definitely holding on to that mace for use at the Capitol because we saw them use it at the Capitol later on. So this idea of, well, it's a red herring for the right to say, well, prove to me that there were guns. Well, we said weapons. A mace is a weapon, and you should take it seriously. But, of course, they only take guns seriously, and they don't even do that, really. That's just something they were doing to protect themselves because they could be mugged in D.C. Anyway, the supporters didn't want to enter the security perimeter, as we noted, because they were carrying all sorts of weapons that would have been confiscated from them. And the quote here, or what Hutchinson says is the quote, is, "I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me," Trump exclaimed in an extraordinary outburst of fury, according to Hutchinson. "Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing magnetometers, away." The response from the former president is significant for two main reasons. It makes clear that he had been informed that his supporters were carrying weapons, and that he knew those armed people intended to make a non-permitted march to the Capitol. Trump then took the stage at the Save America rally and told his supporters both there at the Ellipse and around the Washington Monument that he would march to the Capitol with them, giving them the strongest incentive to descend on the joint session of Congress. The former president additionally made the comments, Hutchinson said, despite the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, desperately trying to stop Trump, and Trump's chief of staff, Meadows, going to the Capitol, stop all of them from going to the Capitol for fear of political or potential legal exposure. "We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if Trump went to the Capitol," Hutchinson said Cipollone told her the morning of January 6th, alluding to obstruction of an official proceeding and defrauding the United States. The legal analysis from Cipollone was prescient. The Select Committee, even before hearing from Hutchinson for the first time earlier this year in closed-door depositions, has argued Trump and his top advisors violated multiple federal laws over January 6th. At a special hearing, Hutchinson also revealed that Trump's then-attorney Rudy Giuliani and Meadows expressed interest in preemptive presidential pardons in the immediate aftermath of the Capitol attack. The disclosure from Hutchinson marked a new degree of apparent consciousness of guilt among Trump's closest advisors, in addition to that of at least half a dozen Republican congressmen and the Trump lawyer Tom Eastman, or feared that they might have committed a crime. In raising Giuliani's interest in a pardon, Hutchinson also testified that Trump's former attorney may also have been central to a crime with respect to his seeming knowledge of what the far-right Oath Keepers and Proud Boys groups were planning for January 6th. Oath Keepers and Proud Boys were words heard at the White House when Giuliani was around the complex in the days before the Capitol attack, Hutchinson testified at the hearing. The new connection between Giuliani and the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys raised the specter that the former president's then-attorney was broadly aware of the intentions of two far-right groups whose senior members have since been indicted for seditious conspiracy. Meanwhile, on the eve of the Capitol attack, Trump asked Meadows to speak to the far-right political operative Roger Stone and Trump's former national security advisor Michael Flynn, which Meadows did, according to Hutchinson's testimony. The former president's chief of staff then repeatedly raised the prospect of traveling to the Trump War Room at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C., though Meadows ultimately demurred and ended up calling the Trump War Room instead, Hutchinson testified. So now we have that on the record as well, too. Greg mentioned that. The Guardian first reported some point last year, that from the White House, Trump then called Giuliani and a cadre of lawyers working at the Trump War Room at the Willard and discussed ways to stop the certification of Biden's election win. Meadows' connection to the Trump War Room appears to be as significant as Giuliani discussing the far-right groups, not least because the Willard was also the base for both Stone, who has ties to the Proud Boys, and Flynn, who previously worked with the Oath Keepers. The Select Committee's Vice Chair, Liz Cheney, ended the special hearing with evidence of potential attempted witness tampering by people apparently close to the former president. In one mafia-style call, one witness was warned that Trump knew they would remain, quote, loyal. Okay, well, that wraps it up for that piece. All right, still some connective tissue here that needs work, like I said, to prove that Trump wanted more than simply to fill in the size of the crowd at the ellipse. But, I mean, if we're to credit her as being a faithful witness in his saying, I don't care if they have weapons, even that, though, I don't care if they have weapons, they're not here to hurt me, is not necessarily the same thing as I want them to have weapons so that they can attack the Capitol. That's kind of a different statement, so there's going to have to be some more work done there. But you can certainly prove that a reasonable person would have known that leading that group to the Capitol would have some serious consequences. And then, of course, that he then hears reports that they are now chanting, hang Mike Pence, and he says maybe that's what he deserves. Well, okay, there you seem to have something. All right, time for us, speaking of having something, to hand things over to Justice Putnam, who has the West Coast Cookbook and Speaking Seat to offer you coming up next. And who wants a little bit more discussion of January 6th? Anybody? Good, because it's on tap.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
First up, he's got Congressman Jamie Raskin discussing Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony to the January 6th committee. Then, on the rest of the menu, health clinics scramble to divert patients as states with trigger bans on abortions kick in. Michigan Supreme Court has thrown out charges against former Governor Rick Snyder there in the Flint water scandal. Stay tuned.